All right, hi everyone. We're the tender trainers. This is Ricky and Eve here. So we help subcontractors with their tendering. So basically, our goal is to help you make this process as simple and successful as possible, so that you can win those big contracts with less stress. Welcome, Eve. I usually do these by myself, but
Thanks, Ricky. I'm just playing with the layout. There you go. I think that one's good. Thanks, Ricky. I just wanted to give a shout out. If anyone's on live, please feel free to post a comment. If you've got any questions, we're happy to answer them live. So please don't be shy. So shout out to anyone watching live, and also anyone watching on the replay. You can still pop some questions below and we'll do our best to answer them.
absolutely, yeah. We try to do these, well, I do try and do these on a regular basis, even though it's just me sometimes or Eve. So any topic that you feel like would be good to cover, this is your opportunity to ask us anything. All right, should we get into it?
Yeah.
So the topic that we've chosen for this week is 3 steps that you should follow to create a fully complete price from an unclear scope. So basically, you get a tender pack, and as you review the tender pack, some of the scope or the requirements are unclear, meaning in effect you would have to make assumptions to complete your price.
Let me ask you a question, Ricky. I'm just going to interject.
Sure.
How often do you think our guys, who usually say in 500 grand, 2 million range is where a lot of our work's done, how often would you say, turnover per year, how often would you say that they are receiving tender packs that are unclear, have an unclear scope?
This is a very good point. So from my experience, I've sat on the side of doing subcontractor tenders as well as main contractors procurement. So in my couple of years plus doing subcontractor tenders, I've reviewed hundreds of tender packs basically in that time. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to put a figure on it. 50%, I reckon, are unclear. I think it's very common. And I think that
I thought you might be being generous with that.
it could be generous. It could go lower than that. But you can't expect that the main contractor is going to give you everything you need, because this is basically rarely the case from my experience and from what I've seen.
So if we go, so if our clients or our kind of audience, half of the time they're getting tender packs from main contractors or from clients that don't have a clear scope.
Absolutely.
So how can they return a price that they know has everything included and be certain that they're not going to get to the end of the project or halfway through the project and have the client say, yep, you're responsible for that piece of work over there. And they're going to say, I didn't include that in the price. And they're going to say, too bad. Here we have a contract. You said you were going to do it and there's no recourse. So that's, how often have you seen that on a construction project, that outcome?
Too often as well.
I've seen it so many times. I feel like it's almost more common that happens on construction projects than that it doesn't. There's somewhere along the course of the project you're having that conversation.
I agree. I think it happens every project, and I think it becomes competitive around the understanding of what's been signed up to what's being delivered. This has basically always been the case for me on major projects.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And we've both had so much experience, both on the subcontract side, but also a lot of experience in main contract where we're managing multiple contracts ourselves, maybe 5 or 6 contracts. We're seeing this happen with subcontractors over and over and over again. So we feel like this is, sorry, I'm like interjecting because I know you're going to get to the good stuff, but I'm just giving you a really good setup, okay? and then you can drop the knowledge on us. But we obviously feel really passionate about this, right? Because we know that there's some really simple things you can do to protect yourself. So we don't want any of our clients or anyone who's in our audience, or anyone we're connected with, to go through this pain of tendering a project, not getting it quite right because something was unclear in the scope, and ending up potentially being hundreds of thousands of pounds in the hole. That's not unusual situation by any stretch of the imagination. That's actually something that happens quite commonly. So I know that you and I both feel really driven to correct this. Do you want to talk about that for a sec?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why we're here. We want to make this more effective, basically. If we get this right in the procurement phase, it can lead to a lot of less pain when it comes time to final accounting and delivery. When both main contractor and subcontractor are on the same page, a job can run so much smoother and cause so much less conflict, and just make the overall project a lot better for everyone, really, isn't it?
Yeah, which in turn leads to the possibility to make profit, win more work with the same client because they're happy with how the project went. Like, there's a lot in it. I feel like tender stage is underrated. Not enough attention is being paid to. Sometimes it just seems like it's like, just get in and just like win the work and then we'll figure it out. And it's like, no, that's the step that's going to make the project run smoothly or not. Like, this, you've got to get in and get it right there, or it's a lot harder to get back on track.
Absolutely.
The other thing I was just thinking about is, what about having that kind of complete tender return, as in you've had the scope is not very clear, you've got this unclear scope, maybe half of the time you're receiving an unclear scope. How does it impact your ability to win the tender in the way that you deal with that?
Well, I think it's more of an opportunity, to be honest, if the scope is unclear for the tenderer, because if you know what you're talking about and you can get in there and say, look, this is unclear in your documents, how are we going to deal with this, or this would be my suggestion. You can show that you're competent and know what you're talking about. So I see it as an opportunity for the tenderer to really build some trust with the main contractor or the client, to show them you know what you're doing and talking about, particularly if your competitors are on the other side being quiet and not saying anything, and you're bringing clear issues with methodology or tender documentation to the client. They're going to be saying, why haven't the other guys brought this stuff up? So
exactly.
I see it as an opportunity.
I think you're exactly right. It's a huge opportunity. And I also think that this is not a think, this is I know, because I've been in this position many times, but there is one of the biggest fears that a main contractor is going to have when they're going out to tender is that the subcontractor doesn't really get what they're meant to do. And that's going to cause problems along the course of the project. So one of the biggest things that we do with our clients, when we take them through our programs, is we teach them how to build trust with the client. And so we teach them how to demonstrate through tendering and through the relationship that they can get in and do the work. Because I think a lot of people think of tendering, they just think of the price. And no, it's not all one on price. And if someone is purely placing something on price, they're certainly going to have problems along the course of the project. So it's price, but there's got to be trust that you can actually do the work. And so that's what I felt you were speaking to there, Ricky, is like, if you're coming in and you're saying that this scope, I don't think you realize that you've missed this, or do you realize that this is conflicting, or I would need another drawing? All of these questions and comments, that it's showing that you kind of know what you're talking about. You know what you need to do to get it to a price, and you fully understand what you're going to need to know to actually build that project.
Absolutely. And when I sat on the other side of tenders, so choosing who got chosen, that was definitely what I thought.
Yeah, can they do the work?
Yeah, can they do the work? And if they're asking the right questions, that was a big tick in the box for me. I
agree. All right. I'm going to shush now and I'm going to let you crack on with solution, because we've talked about the problem. We know what the problem is. We know why it's so important that it's solved, because you can win more work and you can set up for project success. Now
let's talk solution, and let's talk particularly the 3 steps that we have to solve this. So so ultimately, you know, when you get the tender pack and it's not great, you can obviously still price it, but you're going to have to make assumptions to complete that price. So the risk of making assumptions at tender stage is the price going off on a tangent, isn't it, to the delivery? Which means that the price doesn't reflect how the job will be delivered in the end. And ultimately, there's going to be a difference between the price and the end cost. So this is expanding on the problem a little bit more, but someone's going to have to wear these costs, aren't they? So who wears them, Eve?
The contractor, usually. The subcontractor, that's usually where it lands. Because the reality is sorry, I was just drinking my vitamin juice. The reality is that honestly, the reality is that subcontractors aren't contractually savvy enough to ensure that it's not landing on them. That's what happens a lot of the time. That's why we teach contracts. So I teach contracts as part of what we do, and that's why we kind of give them those tools. But yeah, most of the time it's going to end up with the subcontractor, because the chances are, well, what happens usually is you'll receive a huge pack of documentation. You might send them some emails, you might have some conversations, you might walk around with them on site, and you might say, I'm not pricing that bit over there. And they'll say, that's fine, it's not included. And then you don't price it. And then when they send the contract through, at some point, someone's decided, actually, that bit over there is going to be included in the scope. And you sign the contract, and anything that goes before doesn't count, because contracts supersede what goes before it. And you'll find in pretty much any contract, you can look at any contract, you look at your phone company contract or your house purchase contract. Contracts generally have a whole and complete clause, entire agreement clause it's called. And so that clause says this contract forms the entire agreement between the parties. And what that's saying is, it doesn't actually matter about that email that you sent me last week. It doesn't actually matter about what we agreed on site and what we shook hands on. And it doesn't actually matter what you wrote on your price. What matters is only what's in this contract. That's why it scares me so much, the amount of our audience who don't read contracts.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long answer, but it's going to be on the subcontractor. That's who's going to end up paying for it.
Yeah,
more likely
exactly.
than not, in most
Yeah,
instances.
That's it. I mean, it depends on the contract. In most cases, it's a subcontractor. That's just how it goes. So yeah, we are talking about costs here that might be borne by subcontractors. So, all right, let's start talking about these steps then. So, these 3 steps, I think they're a must follow when it comes to assumptions. You must follow these when you're tendering. Very rarely are you going to have to make 0 assumptions, unfortunately. Sometimes, most of the time, there is an element of it. But step one, in the first instance, we're always clarifying with the client so that we can eliminate the assumptions. And we only make assumptions as a last resort. So work with the client, clarify, and get rid of assumption. That's step one. The goal is basically to minimize your assumptions as much as possible. So you should be working with the client during the tender period and using the tender period to take them out of the assumption column into the known scope and methodology column. You have anything to add there, Eve?
No, that makes perfect sense. So what you're saying is, if you are creating a price or you're looking through the documents and you're thinking, I don't know about this part, I don't know about this part, I'm not sure about this. In some way, shape or form, you need to make sure that by the time you sign that contract, every one of those, I don't know, which actually we often refer to as risk, right? Every one of those have somehow rolled over into that contract. Is that right?
We're skipping steps here, yes, but
Sorry.
First step is trying to eliminate the assumption.
Okay, first step, eliminate assumptions. That sounds like really good. So can you just explain a bit further how do you, if you're going through, say you've got your first big tender on your desk, or you've just got one that you really want to win and your win rate hasn't been that good lately, and you just know this one's important, it's for a new client, and you kind of receive the tender pack and it's not maybe what it could be, but you really want to win it, so you really want to go for it because it's a great client, it'd be great to work with them, but there seems to be a few drawings missing and the scope writing isn't particularly clear where the delineation is between what's your responsibility and what's going to be with someone else. Basically the very basic point of it is, how do you know what work you've agreed to do for in the sum, right? What work you have to go out and do in the sum. And that might end up different from what you've priced for unless you're careful. So when you're going through those, what's the first step as you go through the documentation? How do you start to pull out which bits you're not sure about?
Well, that's the first thing that I would be doing as you're reviewing tender pack would be pulling out the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that is unclear, pulling it out, and then it's using things like the site visit,
Mm-hmm.
and if there's not one, making sure or asking if you can have one, for example.
Yeah.
Even just to talk to the client,
Right.
and using things like RFIs to clarify these problems. Yeah, before just making an assumption to be able to price.
I agree. And I have some questions here. So let's dial back a moment. What do you usually, so firstly, if they're going through and they've got some questions, how do you usually track them? Because I would use Excel.
Yeah. We sometimes, if you want to be professional with your questions, we give them a number and we use an RFI sheet.
What's an RFI?
RFI is a request for information. It's just a simple template that you can put in, give it a number, then you can give it a title, you can write the description, and put the information, which then the main contractor or the client can return to you in that format with the answer.
Yep.
It's a documented, formal way of getting a response to any of these clarifications.
Yep.
Yeah, that's one methodology, and probably the most secure because it's formalized.
I do think RFIs are a good way to go. I do think sometimes they make more sense for very big queries or large projects.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might be able to, for example, if there's a lot of smaller questions, it might make sense to fill out an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or an email and send that over and get those responses from there. So I guess it depends on the person and the project a bit and how big they are. But the key thing is, I just have this image of people like back of a fag packet, got to remember to ask them about this. And, that's not going to cut it because it might take 6 months to place the contract. And are you going to remember what questions you were specifically asking and make sure that they're in the contract? That's the fear that I have.
Yeah, but importantly, it's getting them down and getting them out to the client as quickly as possible so they have time to respond and you have time to accommodate for them the answers.
Totally agree.
All right, let's move on. So step one was eliminate the assumptions. Step two is to qualify your price with AQ&E. So this is where you can't eliminate the assumptions. So basically, with your price needs to be included a clear list of assumptions. And AQ&E is the term I use there, is assumptions, qualifications, and exclusions. So this needs to go with your price so the client knows the basis of your price. So they can see what assumptions you've had to make, what you've excluded, and what's included, excluded, and the assumptions you've had to make to get to that price. In my opinion, it's clear and simple and project specific, and it just forms part of your price. It goes along with your price. All right, move on.
Hang on,
Third
I have
step.
questions.
Go on.
Okay, so firstly, we try and eliminate the assumptions. So that is to say, if you have something that you're not sure about and you're like, I'm assuming that bit's not included. I'm assuming they want me to use this type of material. I'm assuming, but what you're saying is you don't want to assume. So try and get to the point that the client tells you. So you go to them and say, is this bit here included? Are you expecting me to do this element here? Are you expecting me to use this type of material? Whatever. So
Yep.
trying to get to the point where the assumptions, you know them because the client has told you and communicated this type of material, this area, yes, do this part here, yes, and you know, there's an interface here and that's your responsibility, whatever. Then if you can't get the client to tell you because they don't know, the design isn't completed, they're giving you unclear answers or whatever, or they're saying we'll tell you down the track because, yeah, design's still in flux or whatever, then it's like, how do I deal with this? Because something's not
That's
clear.
right.
Yeah. Something's still not clear. And that's when you're saying you complete like a document which will have the assumptions, qualifications, and exclusions on it.
That's right. And it goes with your bid, obviously.
What's an example of a classic assumption that you might have on it?
Just like you talked about, if a spec is not clear, for example, maybe you're doing tiling and they haven't given you the type of tile, you could make an assumption on this. We've assumed that is this kind of basic tile, and that's what the basis of my price is. That's what will go on the list.
Yep.
Because it's listed there, hopefully that will cause a pricing exercise if that type of tile then changes, particularly if it's something more expensive.
So we've allowed for domus, porcelain tiles, whatever.
Exactly, yeah, rather than natural stone, for example. You know, if
because
it's not
they have not
specified.
told us, and maybe that's what it
And they-
kind of looks like it might be from looking at the drawings, or maybe that's a standard spec that you could have.
Exactly.
What's an example of a qualification? What does that mean?
So the qualification, a good example I like to use for qualifications is, you know, when you do a program, you're assuming that you're completing it in one visit.
Okay.
Not coming, doing half the job, demobilizing, coming back and doing the second half of the job, which is an obvious more cost, right? So that would be a qualification where you're saying this price is from start to finish, we come in and we do it.
Yeah. It's almost information around how you've decided to price it.
Yeah.
Like a little bit around,
exactly.
you know, yeah. So like this is how many, this is what, yeah. This is like, it's going to be one visit, or we'll have one return visit, or, you know, we have one super per 3 people or something like those might be qualifications, right?
Yes, exactly.
What's an exclusion?
Exclusion, obviously pretty self-explanatory. It could just be, you know, we have excluded this area because it's, you know, or we have excluded this scope type.
Yeah.
So for example, for tiling, it might be we have excluded mastic, which sometimes in packages is done by an alternate package.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, awesome. I also think it's really common to have AQ&Es like talking about what the client needs to do. Like we have not allowed for any craneage to be provided by the client.
Yeah, or skips.
Forklifts or skips or,
you know,
all that kind of
amenities
stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. What's step 3?
All right, step 3. So let's go back. Step 1 was eliminate the assumption, basically. So clarify out. So you eliminate. Step 2 was whatever's left. We're listing them out to go with our tender. And step 3, and this is really importantly, and you touched on it a little bit before, but we need to make sure that our AQ&Es are reflected in the contract before you sign. So this step is really important because, as you talked about before, Reed, once you sign that contract, a lot of those documents submitted before, they become superseded. Uh, and there's a clause in most contracts that talk to that effect, isn't there?
Yeah, that's what we talked about with the whole agreement clause. So how do you, or entire agreement, it's called entire agreement. So how do you, like, what would be the actual step that you would take to make sure that it's included? Because I feel like what happens is sometimes the procurement process takes so long, and by the time you're signing a contract, you might not have looked at the price for 4, 5, 6 months, super busy, lots else going on. You're excited to start, you just sign it. So how would you, what do you propose the process is to receiving that contract and making sure that you kind of make sure that everything's involved, is included?
From the main contractor the way that we would put a contract together is any of the subcontractors' exclusions are discussed in meetings and agreed prior to finalizing the contract, and then that list of AQ&Es and the discussion results and the answers would then form part of the contract. So it would be very, very clear that this exclusion is agreed by the client, and this document would be in the contract. So that is my preferred way to make sure that they're in the contract, is just via a document that is listed that forms part of the contract.
I have to say that I have never seen that happen.
Okay, I've done many contracts like that, but I am aware from what I see that it doesn't happen very often.
So what you're saying is that we've got a price and a list of assumptions, qualifications, and exclusions that our subcontractors have submitted to the main contractor as part of the tender. So they're saying, this is what the price is, and this is what we are not including, or where we've made assumptions, or where we're telling you kind of exactly how we're doing the work, which is like around qualifications.
Yep.
And in an ideal world, and you've seen this happen and I haven't, is that list of AQ&Es, assumptions, qualifications, and exclusions would be included in the contract, so everyone's clear on what the price is and what was included and what wasn't included in the price.
Yes, and that's how I've done contracts, and I'm aware that not everyone does it. However,
so
what did you do in your cases,
most
Eve?
Common advice that I've had working as a main contractor: don't include it, don't include it, don't include it.
Yeah.
So that piece of paper somehow just doesn't make it to the contract. And what does is the main contractor's list of assumptions, qualifications, and exclusions that they include, where they've kind of said, or their kind of terms and conditions around the scope, where they've kind of said, this is what's included, this is what's not included. And actually, in my experience, it's been way more often, almost across the board, that unless the subcontractor comes and says, hey, knock, 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 you didn't include my list in here, and you've actually said that we're doing this, and I didn't agree to that, that won't make it into the contract. So what I see as a totally common thing, and which scares the bejesus out of me, is that you submit a price, you submit assumptions, qualifications, and exclusions. The main contractor takes out your AQ&Es, puts in theirs, and then you sign it.
Yeah, that's what you need to be really careful of, isn't it?
And
I think,
because of the entire agreement clause, doesn't matter what went before, you've agreed, you signed it, this is what you've signed up to for the price that you've submitted.
Exactly. And I think importantly, okay, if they're not going to include your list of AQ&Es, you're reviewing the contract and you're going through it and making sure something that you've excluded doesn't particularly say that you will do it in the contract. That needs to be brought up before you sign it, and highlighted before you sign it, and changed before you sign it, by either one, pricing for it and increasing your price, or two, noting that it's excluded.
Totally. So
and I actually have a good example of where this has fallen down. If you want me to go, if you want if you're
Please do.
interested, Eve.
Let's hear it.
So on a job that I worked on previously, a major project, this is exactly what happened. So basically, the subcontractor had qualified an exclusion, and I'm going to talk about one exclusion only. They qualified that exclusion in their tender, and they got a contract, and they blindly signed the contract. And the contract said that they were going to deliver that scope element that they'd excluded within their tender.
What
So
happened?
a year down the track, different QSs on the job, myself being one of them, we were administering the contract. The contract said that they were to deliver it, so the main contractor, pushed for them to deliver it. Under the contract, they refused to do it, and under the contract, there's usually a clause that says if the subcontractor does not deliver an element, then the main contractor can engage someone else and contracharge some contractor that cost. And that's exactly what happened. And it was to the tune of 50 grand for one item. Yeah.
So when I think about what we hear from our audience and our clients all the time, which is, I just signed the contract, I don't really have the time, I don't really understand it, I just need to push on and get it done. And you think about that being a 50 grand exercise to sit down and read that contract. How do you feel about that? I think if they had that consciousness of how much it could end up impacting their business, one thing, don't read it yourself then, get someone else to read it, but make sure they really fully understand the scope that you've priced, because if you just get someone to read it and just tell you generic things, that might not be helpful. And we do have people as well. Shout out to Vivian. I know that they do, the guys there, Redec and oh my gosh, dude, I've forgotten your name for the moment, but I know that those guys, they do contract reviews. So just, you can drop me a DM if you want to be connected with them. But there's plenty of people out there. These are the guys I'd recommend, but there is help out there if you don't want to do it yourself. And so best to chuck a few £100 at that and save yourself potentially 50 grand, or learn the skill yourself, which is part of what we teach. Having some knowledge yourself is super key. I don't care how much you want to outsource things, do it, but try and learn a bit yourself too. So you're starting to like have those tools to take forward and you're kind of in control.
Absolutely. And I think really importantly, challenge contracts and challenge, scope items that aren't priced or have been added in, because like this example, the main contractor it's almost pulling the wool over the eyes of the subcontractor a little bit. I think both are at fault a little bit, but don't trust the main contractor's got your best interest when it comes to that. You need to make sure and you need to challenge.
The reality is that they don't. They just want to get the project done. And even the most relationship focused, you know, even the clients you worked with for a long time, you still need to be careful, because as you said, a new QS could start, ownership could change, they could start losing money on projects. You don't know what's going to happen, so you need to cover yourself. And what you said there was so bang on, because I always have a feeling that the clients that we're working with seem to have an idea that they can't challenge the contract, that if they want the work, they just have to sign. Like it's all or nothing. Like they've given me an opportunity, I just have to sign it and crack on. And actually, there's ways that you can challenge it that can even advance your relationship, where you can be like, look, I just want to make sure that everything that we sign up for, everyone's completely on the same page. And I just noticed that this is included and haven't priced for it. So I'd need to put a price in for that element if that's what you want.
And I think if you've done your AQ&Es well, you're justified in saying that, to be honest.
Completely agree. Completely agree. And if you've got that, you've sent them a spreadsheet and you can show them the answers that they sent, or you've kind of tracked it in some way, or your request for information, as you've said, then I think that helps that as well. And whether it's grab a quick meeting with them to run through things or jump on the phone, there's ways that you can kind of go, really, really, really want to work with you. I just want to make sure that we're setting up right from the start.
Absolutely. So yeah, when we train clients on putting stronger together. These 3 steps, they're quite important, aren't they, Eve? So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean,
It's super key.
it's
It's the
super
difference
key.
between making profit and not making profit is so much in this, exactly what we've just talked about right here.
Absolutely, and it really can impact the smooth running of the project as well. So it can really impact, combativeness during the project, profit, smooth delivery, all of that. Just getting this element
Yeah.
right.
And even to the point of, if I receive, like, don't really receive AQ&Es, or I receive a very short list, I actually immediately have less faith in the price, because I think, oh, they haven't really gone through this properly. They haven't really priced it properly. They haven't really thought about what they're including. So I think that's one thing too.
Absolutely.
I feel like we've done it. Is there anything that you want to
Yeah.
add?
No, that's it for today. Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to do a
That's
quick
it.
plug for group. I'm going to just do a quick plug. So yeah, just give me a couple of minutes. If you've enjoyed our content, if you'd like to learn more, Ricky and I run a couple of group programs, and we also do one-on-one training. What we're most excited about is our group program that we don't have a name for yet, but it's going to be something along the lines of maybe like firm foundations. I don't know. Ricky's going to choose a name. He doesn't like it, but this is our program for clients for subcontractors who are earning between $500,000 and $2 million a year, 500,000 to 2 million, kind of in that range. And it's designed to help them add hundreds of thousands of pounds of revenue to their business through safe tendering, through simple systems, up your win rate, spend less time actually tendering, get your evenings and weekends back, get the right people in place to help you, learn how to outsource to QSs, learn how to put together a really professional tender submission, and bump your revenue up while keeping it safe, so that you are contractually protected, so that you protect your reputation, so that it's not just all about winning tenders, guys. There's like a good way to do it, and that's what we're going to teach you. Group launches in April, and we are currently taking signups for it. So if you want to DM me, you can DM me group, or you can say, hey, can we have a chat? I want to talk to you about tendering, and we can have a conversation, because doors are open as of today. Yay. So yeah, I think that's it. We have a YouTube channel, so we've got loads more free content on there as well. If you've learned something today and you're not quite at the point of signing up for a program, jump in and take a look at that. We just love to share this knowledge because we can see how much is needed. And we have a mailing list, so you can go on that too.
Cool.
I think that's it. Cool.
All right.
Until
Thanks.
next time.
Yeah. See you next time.
Sorry for taking over, Ricky. Ciao.